"Mercy, Dark Lord." The weight on his legs was moving, and panting as hard as he was, and there was something warm and wet. Rod got his legs out from under the heavy weight at last, and grabbed for the flashlight he kept on the floor beside the bed, swinging himself away and up to his feet just as fast as he could. Light snapped into brilliant being. He whirled, snatching his old Excalibur letter opener out of the book he'd left it in and brandishing it as if he were some sort of armored knight, instead of a hairy, skinny man wearing only boxer shorts. The light gleamed off the point of his letter opener, and Rod found himself staring over it and into the pleading emerald eyes and pain-twisted face of the woman from his dream, the blood-drenched stumps of her severed wings jutting up from her shoulders. She was on her hands and knees on the end of his bed, trembling violently, amid a dark red sea of soaked sheets and dripping, hanging down innards. Skin whiter than his sheets where it wasn't dark with gore, long black hair tangled and matted, and those eyes. Her jaw quivered in pain as she gasped, "Dark Lord, help me!" Rod stared at her in disbelief, shaking his head without really noticing. This couldn't be happening. He must still be dreaming. This must all be part of it. Dark Lord. I'll what? What the hell would I do if I were awake? "I'll get an ambulance," Rod snapped, striding across the room to the phone. Letter opener down, receiver up, an old, ugly rotary, heavy and solid and black, reassuring to hold on to in this crazy Something silver flashed bright moonlight as it spun past his cheek to thunk solidly into the wall. Something that left severed coils of phone cord dancing in Rod's face, and the dial tone of the heavy receiver in his hand suddenly silent. He whirled to face whatever it was in the direction it had come from, aiming his flashlight like a gun. Rod found himself looking at the blood-slicked, clenched and trembling hands of the woman on his bed, who promptly cried, "No! No one here must know, or your power will be ended, and with it all our hope. Dark Lord, you must undo the evil you have wrought on us." Rod Everlar stared at her, dazedly wondering why he'd never bought a gun, and then wondering what he'd do with one right now if he had it. She was dying. She should be dead already, and women didn't have wings and snow-white skin and didn't swing swords while wearing armor or hurl daggers either. Except in Falconfar, in his dreams. He was going mad, he must be. If he'd drunk anything stronger than soda this week, he'd be blaming this on booze right now. This just couldn't be happening. Not even in his books did women with wings who'd just been gutted and left to die fall onto the beds of lonely thriller writers in the middle of the night. Any night, drunken or otherwise. Transfixed in the beam of his flashlight, the shuddering Omrar sank belly down on the bed, her strength plainly failing. "Please," she whispered, eyes desperate, her voice strangely purring. "Please." Rod shone his flashlight up at the ceiling, whole and unmarked, and wildly around the room to make sure there was no one else lurking anywhere. Not that it sounded like it. He lived alone, and the creaks and small moans of the old house were familiar things. This visitor was not. The flashlight showed him a wicked-looking dagger buried in the wall beside his head. Its hilt was dark and wet with blood, but he flung the phone down and seized it unhesitatingly. Grateful to have some sort of weapon, Rod wrenched it out of his wood paneling with some effort. It had bitten deep. "Dark Lord," the Omrar moaned, her voice fainter. She tried to say something else, but it came out as wet, choking sounds. Rod took a step closer to the bed, waving the dagger. The room smelled of blood and sweat and fear. "Get out!" he snarled suddenly, as something wild rose inside him, sharp and sudden. Fear, his own fear. "Get out of my house!" He lived alone by choice. He didn't want the world thrusting itself into his dreams. The woman on the bed moved, but only to sag forward, shards of shoulder armor clattering briefly. She wasn't going anywhere. She was dying.